believe in Israel's right to exist. Would you consider yourself a Zionist in that narrow definition?
What does that mean, a right to exist?
The existence of the political state of Israel as
but
it
has
existed,
a right. What does that mean?
That you think it should continue in its existence as a state right now. So you do not agree with Iran, for example.
Well, let me just ask, since you asked me the questions.
Yo, what is up, everybody? Larry here. Tucker Carlson just told the editor of The Economist to her face that Trump betrayed America first. Not carefully, not with qualifications, flatly. We put Israel's interests before ours, and Trump made that call. And when she pulled out every rhetorical trap available, the right to exist question, the Zionist label, the anti-Semitism framing, Tucker walked through all of it and turned each one back on her. This interview has layers most people are going to miss, and I'm going to break every single one down for you. Hit that subscribe button and join Larry's View, because this is exactly what we are built for. Let's get into it.
Yes, podcasting about this in the last 2 weeks, you have made the argument very strongly that the United States has been pushed into something not in its own national interest by pressure from Israel and the lobbying power of Israel.
Well, it has been. The question is whether the person who makes the ultimate decision, who would be President Trump, should have pushed back. That's it. Of course, Trump should have pushed back.
As previous presidents have done.
To some extent, some very limited extent. George W. Bush didn't push back. We wound up in the Iraq War, and now everyone pretends, oh, had nothing to do with Israel. I was there. I was talking to Bush. That's not true. That's a lie. And that's why it's so important, from my perspective, to say out loud what is true before history is rewritten and disappears.
Very clear.
And it's lying, and it gets us here. Because we say, oh, no. Lobbying efforts had no effect. Really? We say that about our pharmaceutical policy? No. Everybody understands that every policy a large government makes, including ours, is influenced by various stakeholders who were affected by that policy. But this is the one area we have to be like, no, it had nothing to do with the fact that his biggest donors were pushing him to do this, or the BB visited 7 times in 1 year. Are you joking? I'm not going to play along with the lies anymore. I don't hate Jews. I don't hate Israel. I love my country. This has happened yet again. I can give you a whole list of previous times where it's happened. And I think we need to know what happened so we don't hurt ourselves further.
I am not saying don't blame Israel. I think Israel has its own national interests, and Israel was certainly pushing for things. But I think there is more agency and therefore more responsibility with the President of the United States and the Trump administration.
I wouldn't disagree. He represents me. I live here.
But that's important, because in the way you described it,
Israel pushed him into this. Now, he shouldn't have gone along with it. He should have pushed back. But to pretend that Trump woke up one morning is like, no, I think
I'm not suggesting that, to be clear.
No, Israel pushed him. The prime minister, and by the way, it's not Israel. There are a lot of people who disagree in Israel. I know some of them. It was the prime minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, who pushed our president into doing this. And I hope this is the last time that Netanyahu or any foreign head of state will ever push an American president to do something that hurts America.
Well, let's talk about that, because I think we may be, as you yourself said earlier, at a tipping point in terms of the rapid decline within the United States for support for Israel. Maybe. And you see it huge. I mean, you've seen it for several years on the Democratic side, you're now seeing it on the conservative side, and you're seeing a collapse amongst younger people. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. How quickly is that going to change the politics of Israel in the United States?
I mean, it's hard to know. There doesn't seem to be a direct connection, not just on Israel or foreign policy, but on almost any issue between what our leaders believe and do and what the public thinks and wants. The public begins to believe, in their frustration at their declining standard of living, for example, or declining birth rates, or whatever it is that's getting worse, and a lot is, that there's no way to use legitimate means to change it. Voting doesn't work. If they believe that, then they will, by definition, find other ways, and those ways are destructive, and I don't want that. So I think it's very important that a government, even a non-democracy, even a monarchy, respond to the concerns of the population. You can ignore them for a while. If you ignore them for too long, you get overthrown.
Let's talk, though, a little bit more about how this declining support for Israel, which I think is one of the most significant political shifts in the United States in recent years, how is that shaping the MAGA movement? I mean, are you now seeing a split? I mean, when I look at the opinion polls, I'm told that there's 100% support amongst MAGA or 95% support for the war. On the other hand, you're clearly a man with a large number of followers who is making a very, very different argument.
I was standing next to Trump at his house when he got elected. I've known him a long time. I talked to him a lot. So I don't fully understand what MAGA is, but I know that the core promise of the Trump political movement, Make America Great Again, was America First. And it was articulated by him repeatedly at every campaign stop for 10 years. So everyone in America knows this. I think everyone globally knows this. The core of this movement was the idea that you would, and we could debate about how you do it, but you would try to put the interest of your country at the center of every calculation about how you manage your country and how you interact with the world. It's the single most obvious and single most popular political concept ever devised.
Do you think Donald Trump has betrayed America First?
I think that this war is something that he promised he wouldn't do, not once, but countless times. And until YouTube is banned, we'll be able to prove that. And the idea behind it is not only contrary to America First, it may be its inverse. There's no argument that changing the regime in Iran helps the United States. And if there is an argument, I'd love to hear it. And by the way, if that argument is sensible and convincing, I will support it. All I care about is the United States. But I haven't heard that argument a single time. All I've heard is the kind of tiresome fear-mongering about nuclear weapons, which Iran did not have. It's insulting, actually, even to make that argument to me, that Iran's nuclear program posed such a threat to the United States 3 weeks ago that we had to launch a full-scale war against them. No one's even arguing that because it's stupid and the facts don't support it. So why did we do this when we did it? Because Israel wanted to do it. They chose the timing here. No one disputes that. And timing in war, as in life, is a lot of it, and it determines outcome. And they hadn't thought through what was going to happen next. The Israelis hadn't, and we hadn't, because we didn't have time to.
It sounds to me like you think he has betrayed it.
This war is clearly contrary to what he promised and contrary to the idea that your leaders should put your interests before those of foreigners, period. We put Israel's interests before ours. Trump did that. Bibi's wasn't elected president of my country. My president was. I supported him, obviously, voted for him. But, yeah.
Let's talk about the way the debate develops in this country, because I think you're right. It's extremely difficult to talk about the subject that you and I have just spent the last half hour talking about, because there is a conflation very often. Anybody who criticizes Israel is vulnerable to being called anti-Zionist or anti-Semitic, and there's conflation by the exact people you've just been talking about, in the kind of firmament of political discussion.
Do you think that's a good faith response or a tactic?
I'm about to ask you that question. Clearly, I think you and I agree. We have both been critical of the Israeli government. I just want to kind of clarify terms a bit here.
Well, I've really been critical of the Israeli government.
I've been plenty critical of the Israeli government. I've told you at the beginning that we were against this war.
What do you think of Gaza?
What do I think of Gaza?
Yeah.
I think the war in Gaza, to start with, was a perfectly reasonable response in response to the horrors of October 7th. I think now the places, I've been there. Have you been to Gaza? I've been to Gaza since the war started.
They would not
it's
let
catastrophic.
me into Gaza. Trust me, very few journalists get into Gaza.
Yeah, no, I went with the IDF. It's the only way that you can go in, but nonetheless you go in and you see a flattened place. I think it is a disaster for the future of Israel, a disaster for the Palestinian people, a horror, 70,000 people dead.
Why would you describe it first as a disaster for the future of Israel? You've got tens of thousands of civilians murdered, but it's foremost a disaster for the future of Israel? No, it's foremost a disaster for the families of the dead kids.
Absolutely. I made 3 points.
Because everybody sucks up to Israel in this way that suggests they're afraid. And everyone is afraid, and you know that. Everyone's like, the real problem is calling people anti-Semites allows real anti-Semites to flourish. It's like, no, actually, the real problem with calling people anti-Semites who aren't is accusing the innocent of a crime they didn't commit. And the real crime in Gaza is killing people who did nothing wrong. So those are the real problems, I would say. But no one can say it because you have to be like, oh no, but really October 7th
I don't know what you're talking about, Carlson. We're having a...
Everyone watching this knows what I'm talking about.
Well, let's get on to that right now.
Yeah.
Because you are critical of the government of Israel. Do you believe in Israel's right to exist? Would you consider yourself a Zionist in that narrow definition?
What does that mean, a right to exist?
The existence of the political state of Israel as
but
it has
a right. What does that mean?
That you think it should continue in its existence as a state right now. So you do not agree with Iran, for example.
Well, let me just ask, since you asked me the question, it's fair for me to get you to define the term so I can answer it. You've asked 2 questions. The first was, do you believe Israel has a right to exist? And the second question was, do you believe Israel should continue to go on as a nation state? And those are very different questions. So I often hear the phrase...
Having been created as a political entity in 1948,
does it have a
that
right
state
to exist? Is that what you're asking?
I don't want to get hung up on the right. Should it continue to exist? That's how I define narrowly Zionism.
Because the phrase you used was devised by the Israeli government. Of course, does it have a right to exist? And so my question to you would be, what does that mean?
Why don't you answer my question? It's a very simple question.
I don't know what your question is. Are you asking, does it have a right to exist, or do I want it to exist? Do I seek its destruction?
Fine, answer it that way.
Well, of course I don't seek its destruction.
Okay,
I've already said, as you know, because I said it to you, I don't want Israel to be destroyed or have to use nuclear weapons.
We've established that you are in that narrow terms a Zionist. If that's how
I'm in no sense a Zionist. I don't want any country to be destroyed at all, and I don't want people to die, particularly ones who committed no crime, because I don't believe in killing innocents, period. That's the basis of Western civilization. Eastern civilization is a whole different view. They believe in collective punishment. I don't.
So you're in no sense a Zionist?
I don't even know what that means. Why don't you define the term, and then I'll tell you whether I am.
I've just defined it.
What's a Zionist?
That a Zionist, in my narrow term, this definition is that the state of Israel, the political state of Israel, has the right to continue existing.
The right? Where does that right come from? What do you mean? These are I'm not being a lawyer about it. I just want to know what you're asking me.
You answer the question.
Because I don't know what you're asking me.
Let's go to the third.
Wait, no. I think a lot. You don't want to define your question, and I don't know why. I don't know what you're asking me. I've already said I don't want Israel to be destroyed. I don't want anyone to be killed. And you've said, does Israel have a right to exist? Does it have my question is, what right are you talking about? Does Britain have a right to exist? Does the United States have a right to exist?
There was a world order built up after 1945 which suggested that aggression should not be condoned into countries. Now that countries with borders have the right to continue.
I totally agree with that.
Okay.
Which is why the first thing that Israel did within 2 weeks of this war starting, which is supposedly existential for them, was take southern Lebanon, take someone else's country, as they have done repeatedly. And no one even mentions that. And so I guess I would be opposed to that, because I guess I think Lebanon has a right to exist. I thought Gaza had a right to exist. But I noticed that as soon as we start apportioning rights, only one country gets them.
No, I did not say that. You're absolutely putting words into my mouth.
So because I believe, here's what I do believe, since you asked. I believe in universally applicable standards. And if they're not universally applicable, they're not standards, they're preferences. That's why I believe in human rights, not ethnic rights. I don't think Jews have more rights or less rights than anyone else. I don't think Christians have more rights or less rights, blacks, Filipinos. I believe in human rights.
Tucker told the editor of The Economist directly that the claim Israeli lobbying had nothing to do with the Iraq War is a lie. He was in those rooms. He talked to Bush. That is not an inference from public records. That is someone with direct access saying the official story is false and has always been false. That lie cost over 4,000 American lives, trillions of dollars, and destabilized an entire region for 2 decades. The people responsible maintained it successfully for 20 years because the moment anyone raised the question they got labeled anti-Semitic and the conversation died. Tucker named that tactic on camera and kept talking anyway. The same machinery that produced Iraq produced the Iran war. Same donor pressure, same foreign government access. Netanyahu visited the White House 7 times in 1 year. 7 times. The Prime Minister of Israel had more access to the American president in the lead-up to this war than most American cabinet members. Trump's biggest donors were pushing for it the entire time. Tucker put both facts on the table without flinching, and the editor of one of the most powerful publications in the world had nothing because the facts are documented. The right to exist exchange is the one every person who has ever been shut down in a conversation about Israel needs to study. That question is a trap with 2 exits, and both of them kill the conversation. Say yes, and you endorse every Israeli government action as an expression of that right. Hesitate, and you are anti-Semitic, and nothing you say afterward counts. Tucker refused both exits. Does Britain have a right to exist? Does America have a right to exist? Where does that right come from, and who invented that specific phrase? She could not answer because answering would have exposed the phrase as a political tool, not a principle derived from international law or moral philosophy. Tucker made the mechanism visible on her own platform in front of her own audience, and she had nothing left but to change the subject. These clowns on the pro-war side have never honestly answered the universally applicable standards argument, and Tucker put it directly to her face. If standards are not universally applicable, they are not standards, they are preferences. Israel took southern Lebanon within 2 weeks of a war it called existential, one country taking another country's territory by force. The same post-1945 international order the editor cited as the basis for Israel's right to exist prohibits exactly that. The ICJ ruled Israeli occupation violates international law. The UN General Assembly voted on it. But that principle only gets enforced in one direction. Tucker said he thought Lebanon had a right to exist. He thought Palestine had a right to exist. She moved on because there was nowhere to go. Every Trump voter who cast a ballot on the promise that American leaders would put American interests first needs to sit with what Tucker said next. The core promise of that movement, stated at every rally for 10 years, was that American leaders center American interests in every calculation, not donor interests, not a foreign prime minister's political survival, American interests. No coherent strategic justification for the Iran war exists from an American national interest standpoint. Tucker said he would hear the argument, he would engage with it honestly. Nobody made it because no serious argument exists. What got made instead was nuclear fear-mongering that Tulsi Gabbard's own written testimony contradicted before the bombs dropped. Netanyahu wanted this war. Netanyahu chose the timing. Trump went along with it. Tucker said the Israelis chose the timing and nobody disputes that. Timing in war determines outcome. The United States launched a military operation against Iran on a schedule set by a foreign government whose prime minister logged 7 visits to the White House in the previous year. That is the documented reality, and the media apparatus that should be interrogating it spent the interview asking Tucker whether he considers himself a Zionist. Tucker Carlson is not a Democrat. He is not an ally of this channel on most issues. But what he said in that interview is factually grounded, historically documented, and important for anyone who wants to understand how American foreign policy actually gets made and who it actually serves. The editor of The Economist could not refute a single point. Not the donor pressure, not the Netanyahu visit count, not the absence of a strategic argument for the Iran war, not the universally applicable standards test. She asked about Zionism instead. That tells you everything about how this conversation gets managed and who benefits from keeping it that way. Share this video with someone still waiting for a straight answer on why America went to war with Iran. Like this video if Larry's view is giving you what the algorithm keeps burying. Subscribe and hit the bell because we are not slowing down.